Morning, everybody. This morning's speaker is Mr. Jonathan Starr. Jonathan Starr worked on Wall Street for about 10 years, ran his own hedge fund, and then founded Abarso Tech in 2008. Abarso Tech identifies the top 100 scorers in the country of Somaliland. And brings them to this wonderful school. We're lucky at Taft to have Naima Haidid. Naima, could you stand for 1 second? And that's all I've got to say. Jonathan.
It's a much better applause than you're going to give me once you hear what I have to say today. I'm going to talk about the international aid industry. I come from the business world originally, but I've now been 3 years in what's officially the #1 failed country in the world for, I think it's 6 straight years. I've seen how international aid works, and I think it's shocking. And it's something that you should learn about, even if you don't like some of what I'm going to tell you. So, first of all, ooh, that didn't come out so well, huh? Looks great on my screen, though. That is a picture that you've all seen before, which is incredibly helpless-looking kids who look like they haven't been fed in a month. The question is not, do you want to help? I'm sure most of you in this room want to help. The question is, can you help? There are things in this world we cannot do successfully. And that's what this is about, and that's what I want you to be able to look at today. And if photos don't work, we're in trouble here. I have 3 parts. The first part, I'm going to talk about actually the aid model, how these organizations, really businesses, are set up. And my argument is that basically the model has failed. It can't work the way it's set up. The second part is it's actually greatly worse than just wasting. People think, oh, well, if I send a container of food to starving kids in Mogadishu and a third of it shows up because the rest was wasted, well, at least a third of it got there. I actually think that's the wrong way to look at it, and we'll go through that. And then finally, is there still a way to help even after I say all these things? And we'll go through that. Okay, so first of all, aid is going to be a tough business model. And this part, you're going to have to really think a little bit with what I'm talking about. I know you don't have a big business background, but aid is a really tough business model. The way they've run it didn't make it easier. They've actually made it impossible. So, first of all, I'm not the first person to say that international aid has failed. This is a non-exhaustive list of books that are just about how international aid has failed. There are plenty more out there. Some of these are 500 pages long. The Road to Hell is actually a book about Somalia and about what happened in Somalia that led up to actually your Black Hawk Down period, where it's basically about aid funding terrorists. Okay. Aid is business without revenue. Let's go through this. What is aid? Aid is the delivery of goods and services at a partially or fully subsidized cost. That's really what it is. I'm teaching people. I'm delivering food. I'm building bridges. Whatever it is I'm doing, I'm not charging people the full value for it. How different is that from regular business? Well, that's delivering the same goods and services at a profit. These things are greatly the same. What's the difference between them? First, aid is essentially business without the customer paying. Is that really important? We'll get through that in the next slide. The second thing is, it's still business. You still need to know how to deliver whatever that good or service is. If you can't deliver it well, you're not a very good organization. Just wanting to do a good job doesn't mean that you're going to do a good job. Many of you could want to run Microsoft well. That doesn't mean you'd be able to run Microsoft well. It's not just about having a good heart. You need to physically figure out, how am I going to get these goods that I'm trying to deliver, or this service, how am I going to do it properly? How am I going to do it best? This is the slide I want you to think about the most. Revenue. Revenue is a fancy way of saying sales. How much does a customer pay me? Revenue is incredibly important. Why? First of all, people generally pay for what they value. None of you buy things you don't like. If you buy something you don't like, you don't buy it again once you realize you didn't like it. Revenue is how a company or organization realizes, oh, they like that. Oh, they didn't like that. That's a failed product. That's a failed service. No one's buying it. Companies that can't generate much revenue go out of business. It's a very good system. Any of you taking economics in here, that's a very fundamental tenet of economics. If a company cannot generate enough revenue to fund its costs, it's going to go out of business. This is a good thing for the world. It means people didn't value what they provided. So they shouldn't provide it anymore. That makes sense. Okay, no revenue. This is really the key part. Without revenue, accountability virtually disappears. Why do I say that? So let's do a show of hands. How many of you would pay $400 for a new Nokia smartphone that had bad reviews? Hands. How many of you have a Nokia smartphone right now? That's what I thought. How many of you would take one for free? So, if they give it away for free, and then the sales guy tells the CEO, says to him, oh, people love this smartphone we produced. We should produce a ton more of these. What does that mean? And how can the Nokia CEO, who's based in Finland, have any idea whether or not you like the smartphone if they're giving them away for free? Now, I'm not saying you should never give anything away for free in the aid business. I'm saying when you give something away for free, it is incredibly hard to measure if anyone actually wanted it. Let me say that again, because this is a key problem with aid. If you give things away, it's incredibly hard to tell if anyone wanted it. Save the Children can provide horrible service in Somaliland for free and still say, hey, we had 100 people attend this seminar, we had 200 people trained in this, maybe no one got trained. It was free. We don't know if it worked or not. So what would be a logical way to set up your nonprofit? I'm sorry, I use some of these words interchangeably. Nonprofit, NGO, I don't know if you've heard the term NGO, but non-governmental organization, it's a very stupid name for anything. Anything's a non-governmental organization that's not a governmental organization. Anyway, but what it means basically is a nonprofit. So what's a logical nonprofit so that you're not the guy in Finland trying to tell whether or not something worked thousands of miles away without any customer data about whether anyone was willing to pay for it? So first, you'd want to keep it small and in one place. If you have it small in one place, someone who has one shop and works there probably doesn't need to check the financial figures at the end of the day to know, hey, we had a good business day. Oh, we had a bad business day. I mean, your management of the school is here, is with you. It's probably not that hard for them to say, you know, I feel like the students aren't improving at the same rate they used to, or we're doing a better job than we used to. They see you. They know. They're here. How could they do that if they had 20 schools around the country? They'd never be able to. So one thing was keep it small. Another thing is you have to find a way for the executives who are making the decisions in the end to have lots of customer contact. Or in the case of aid, lots of recipient contact. The Save the Children's based in Greenwich or Stamford. Do you think they know whether or not the Somaliland people actually liked whatever service was provided in their training they held there? You guys have no idea. He'll never go to Somaliland. I mean, he has no idea whatsoever. That, if you had one place, one close, easy to see place, it would be much more doable. I mean, this is what how our school's set up. We have one campus. We didn't want to have 25 campuses. We have one campus. At one point in the last year, I was going over just a few math problems. I don't usually teach directly, but I was going over a few math problems with some of our top students, and I could not believe some of the things that I realized were flaws in their upbringing they had with math. And from there, I said, okay, I'm going to take out a fourth grade textbook. And I took a fourth grade textbook and I said, let's just give this to a few kids. Let's give a test. I couldn't believe how horribly they did on a fourth grade math book. These are kids who were taking pre-calculus. Some of them taking calculus. But they get a 50 on fourth grade math. They couldn't convert a fraction to a decimal properly. They couldn't add fractions properly. It could take them a minute to do some simple, whatever it's called, switching over between those two. So we then gave the test to the whole school. The 9th graders got a 50 on a 4th grade math test. The 10th graders got a 67. The 11th graders got a 75 on a 4th grade math test. Now, a lot of them couldn't really handle calculus work, but they could not do this. And it was causing all kinds of problems in their performance, on their SATs, in all their performance. It wasn't, and the teachers would say, I just don't understand why they make so many simple mistakes. Well, they made so many simple mistakes because their foundation was weak. So we went back and all the kids started doing a book that had kids with like yo-yos and all that stuff in the pictures until they all got up to 95% or 100% on it. Had we not been on the ground, we never could have known that was a problem. There's no way the Save the Children executive sitting in Greenwich is going to figure out that his program in Afghanistan isn't teaching the right thing. It's impossible. They can never figure that out. They'll never make the adjustment. They'll just completely stick with whatever's been done. Okay. End-to-end results-oriented projects. By this I mean, you would want to make sure I have a clear, whatever I'm doing, I'm taking it from the beginning to the end. Why? Because it's about accountability. If I'm taking it from the beginning to the end, I can't blame anyone else when it didn't work. Now, you don't need this in most business, but you do need this when you've taken away the customer paying for something. So you need to have as much accountability as possible, and that's one way. The last thing, and this is really something that I'd say our school of Barso Tech, the Peace Corps, Teach for America, are completely in a different direction than every other NGO I've seen in the world, which is we basically, we tell our teachers, you're going to get $3,000 a year. That's our salary we pay. Our teachers, we've had people from Harvard, Stanford, Princeton, a couple from U Chicago, and the list goes on. For $3,000 a year, they go to the #1 failed state in the world. Now, when they come, none are there for the money. I can guarantee them that. I guarantee that. If they come because they have a passion for what we're doing. Now, contrast that with NGO workers, nonprofit workers who are in Somaliland, who are getting $50,000 a year and have no expenses. They net $50,000 a year. These are people who might be 25 years old and couldn't get a job anywhere else, and they're netting $50,000 a year. Are they there because they care about the project? Probably not. Maybe. Who knows? You don't know. What I know with our teachers is no one's there for the money. You're there to sacrifice. You're there to actually do something good. If not, you shouldn't have come. The NGOs have the exact opposite. The UN actually is set up, and the UN, I don't know if it's like the grand NGO. It's like they are the biggest nonprofit really in the world. The UN actually in their charter said we're going to pay above market rates for everyone we have. First of all, that makes no sense. You'd never hear a business say, we'll pay more than we have to for everything. But the UN, and I'm saying, and even if they did, in a business you could possibly justify it. In the UN case, now I have a bunch of people just in it for the money. And you might think, oh, but I don't believe UN workers would really be that way. And that means you haven't met UN workers. Because the way I started thinking about this stuff actually greatly came from meeting these people on the basketball court at a hotel one time and thinking, what is wrong with these people? They couldn't care less. One guy, when asked what he does, he said, you find a corner, And the days turn into weeks, and the weeks turn into months, and the months turn into years. Oh, great passion for helping Somalis. That's wonderful. All right. So that's how a logical nonprofit would be set up. How are they actually set up? Let's look at one of the biggest in the world, CARE. 84 countries, 1,051 projects. Not exactly my one store idea that I was talking about, the one thing everyone can see. They have no idea at an executive level what's going on in 1,051 projects. The only reason companies can be multinational is because of the data they get on revenue. That is it. Inventory data, revenue data. That's how Target can have stores all over the place. When something is not selling well, their computer systems tell them, for some reason, raincoats aren't selling in Atlanta. And then they go call up the store and say, what's going on with that? When you have no revenue data, you can't do that. You cannot be in 84 countries successfully when you have no data to run your operation. They're completely based around their real revenue, which is the donors. You have a very strange case in nonprofits. You're not paid by the people you serve. You're paid by other people. So how are most of these organizations set up? They'll have their Geneva office, because that's a big UN site, your New York office, your DC office, your Nairobi and Addis Ababa offices, because that's where the African money comes through. London, because there's money there from DFID, which is a big UK organization that gives money, government money. They're set up with the most spectacular photographers to show you pictures like the one you were supposed to see in the beginning. That's how they're set up. They want to make sure you see everything that would make you want to donate. Governments donate. They take you hear about lobbyists. You've never seen lobbying like these guys do. They're built as lobbyists. They talk about things purely in business contract terms. I remember one of the guys, a senior guy at one of the big NGOs said, well, there's a big USAID $19 million secondary school contract coming out. We've partnered with these guys. Those two guys are partnered together. It was completely a business transaction. That's it. He even told me, in the end, this is not going to have much at all to do with what's delivered. Well, that's great. $19 million going to Somaliland, and it's not going to have much to do with what's actually going to be delivered for that $19 million. Now, anyone ever heard of Tinker to Evers to Chance? Yes, Tinker to Evers to Chance, the greatest double play combination supposedly ever. They actually made a poem about it and then put these three guys in the Hall of Fame, basically just based on a poem. This does not work so smoothly. This is really how the handoffs go. You pay taxes to the US government. They give it to a government organization called USAID. USAID gives it to CARE's headquarters, wherever that is. They give it to the NGO's region, the CARE in the region. They go to a local one, and then it gets subcontracted further. Now, you could say, well, that's a middleman's dream. That's true. A lot of middlemen in that, a lot of people who take a little piece of that pie. That's not even my issue. My issue is when it goes wrong, who messed up? And they love it this way. They love making it so you can't say you ran a failed project. So when all these books are written about incredible aid failures, about NGO food aid money that went to fund the Hutu rebels who were trying to take over, regain Rwanda from the Tutsis after their genocide. Aid money went to fund them. They don't want you to see that they were the ones involved. The whole place is just spread out responsibility, so no one's responsible. And then, what I call, please don't measure my failures. It is incredible how many millions of dollars are spent on health in Somaliland. Health NGOs. None of them run a hospital. Isn't that the first thing you think of when you think of health? You think of doctors, hospitals. None of them run a hospital. The educators, all this education money, none of it goes to schools. They don't run a school. They might say, oh, we'll pay for a teacher. We'll pay for this. We'll build a school. They'll never run the school they build. They don't want to be responsible. And maybe they can't run it. Maybe they're not any good at what they do. They don't want you to see that. If they ran a school, you'd know that they ran it horribly. And this is actually the most ridiculous. Let's go back to my Nokia example. Show of hands again. How many people would take one for free? Some of you really don't like Nokia. Keep your hands up if you take it for free. All right, now, how many of you would take it if they paid you $200 to take it? Can I get the rest of the hands? Yeah, okay. This is actually how the business works. I'm serious, they will run a seminar and they'll pay you to attend. And then they say 100 people attended my training. Like 100 people wanted $15 or $20 that day. You actually have people who are professional seminar attenders in these places. They have and the NGOs do what's easiest for them, and no one will know. You have a list of people, and it doesn't matter if it's the farming agriculture seminar, the mining seminar, or the education seminar. I just need my list of people to come so I can go tell people I trained 100 people today. So you invite the same people. And of course they come, they get a nice meal out of it, they get $15, which may not sound like a lot, but it's actually a lot in that country. And we have people on staff who are paid $50 a month. $15 is pretty good. It's actually negative revenue. Now I absolutely cannot tell at all who wanted to come to this conference. And they'll say, I've talked to them about this. They say, well, if I don't pay them, no one will come. I think, do you not see a problem with that? Okay. So, put it all together. And again, my problem, I'm not talking about waste. There's an incredible amount of waste. I'm saying the model has no accountability. That's my issue. Okay, what are the results? They're terrible at the unpaid business of providing aid, but they sure are good at the paid business of getting funding. That's why you see incredible photos of all these droughts, famines, all this stuff. That's why you see it. That is worth tremendous amounts of money to these organizations. Sad pictures are great marketing tools. I'm not saying that there are no kids who are in these sad pictures. It's true. But they're showing it to you as a business. Okay, now, I really hope these pictures show up. This is kind of the quicker part. If it was only waste, please. Okay, kind of. You can see it a little. This is a river in southern Somalia where famine hit. This is the Shabelle River. You can see water there, right? Okay, good. This is what rivers look like in Naima's hometown. Do you see water in the picture? That's not the photo problem. That's because there's no water in the rivers. It rains. When it rains, they fill up and then dump it out. Don't think I've ever seen water in the rivers. So here's the question. If water and sun weren't the problem, why was the famine in the south, where the rivers run, and not in the north, where there is nothing in the rivers except trash? Why was that the case? In the north, in Somaliland, where Naim is from, the food doesn't even come from there. The food actually comes from the south and from Ethiopia. All the bananas in the country come from Mogadishu, where there was famine. So why is that the case? Well, it could be because these are the people who ran the country. This is Al-Shabaab, terrorist group, Al-Qaeda linked. That's who runs the country in Mogadishu, or who was running it at the time of the famine. Now, the international charities at that point, this is Heifer International, which you may have heard of. This is their headquarters. They said, we need food aid. You saw, how much did you see about the famine? It was all over the place. Incredibly sad pictures that are true. I'm not saying they're not true. They said we need food aid, which means this, containers, that's a food ship, containers full of food. Now, who's going to distribute that? You bring your container to Kismayo or Mogadishu, the ports in the south, and you think a bunch of people from CARE International get off the boat, go onto that land where they'd be kidnapped in 2 seconds, and go start handing out the food? No. They give it to these guys to distribute. Now, what do you think they do with it? They buy bigger guns. That's what they do with it. This is not a joke. This is what actually happens. They take the money. This is well established. Of course they take the money. They sell it, Now, even when you give it to the governments, most of these governments are corrupt. What do they do with it? They take the money. They sell it and take the money. All right, so the picture that just didn't come out. As sad as it is, the guys who are the Al-Shabaab group, the terrorist group, they want you to see these pictures. These are great pictures for them. They love famine pictures. Famine pictures lead to this. That's how they get funded. They get funded by your food aid. You may think, oh, I'm doing such a nice thing. And you may have meant to do such a nice thing. But it's not nice when it goes to the guys who are keeping the people in horrible shape. The guys who make it to the place where the rivers run with water actually do worse than a place where the rivers are dry. Now, you can tell it's sad though, right? The NGOs love these photos too. Why? Does that look like a cheap building? I mean, I think that's humiliating. I don't know how they, I've read about it. It says it's an environmentally friendly building. I just don't see how they could possibly think it's okay for them to work in this building and spend the money on this. But that's how they fund it. They take a piece of every one of these contracts. Oftentimes they have like just a general agreement. We get 35% for our administrative overhead. That's how they stay in their jobs. Okay, so to summarize the problems we face here, there's no accountability in international NGOs. There's none. It was going to be tough because of the revenue problem, which is very hard to get around. When you're working with very poor people, it's hard to charge them a lot of money. So it's very hard to get around the revenue problem, but they took the problem and made it much worse. What they are good at is making you feel bad. That's what they're really good at. And you should feel bad, but it doesn't mean that you want to fund the people who are actually causing the damage. And when you think about it, and you look, the famines in the world, the real major awful things in the world that happen, usually they're man-made. Now, I'm not saying that it was a good harvest for the Somalis that year. It was not. It wasn't a good rain year. But the problem is that the country was run by horrible people who were oppressing their people. That's the problem. And you're going to probably find everywhere in the world where there's this major famine-type problems, the reason is man-made. It's leadership. It's the government at the time. And that's who you're going to have to give it to deliver. Those people are not dumb. They want your money. And as harsh as that sounds, I think you have to face the reality. And look, I went to the #1 failed state in the world and worked for free. I mean, I'm not like a bad person. I don't like to see people do poorly. I don't like to see a kid starve. But I'm telling you, to just be sending containers of food to evil people to distribute is not the answer. So you may have to say, there are things in this world that we can't do, and this is unfortunately one of them. So, final part, is this hopeless? Is there anything we can do? Peter first said I had to put in something like this, otherwise you guys would stone me. So what you can do, I did come up with a few things. I thought hard. But before I say them, I wanted to say one thing. I do think one of the best books written about this was a guy, William Easterly, an NYU professor. And it's a 400 or 500 page book. And he really does not have, he maybe has 5 pages of what you can do in a 500 page book. And his answers basically knock the whole system to the ground and put a little bit back in its place. And people got very angry about it, which I think they're wrong. I do think there are times when you have to accept, I cannot do that. There are things you can't do in this world. And maybe funding a group of people where you have to give it to an evil group of people to get it to them is one of them. But what can you do? So #1, stop funding Al-Shabaab. Stop funding the Al-Shabaab equivalents in other countries. Stop giving aid blindly. You have to look at where it's going. Next, fund if you're going to do it. And I think you should. I don't want to discourage you from caring. Look for small, focused organizations where the workers are paid, things like Teach for America, where you know the people who go in for the right reasons. You could fund our school. That would be okay too. There are things out there that you can find where you can look at the actual motivations of the people and look and say this is doable or it's not doable. You can't have 25 sites around the world. You could, when you get a little older, you could start organizations like that. I mean, if you really want to say, like, what can you do? There's a strange route in life to give you, but you could go to your Ivy League schools most of you want to go to, and they certainly want you to go to. Then you can go work for McKinsey for 5 years in consulting, and once you get a really nice background on how to deliver stuff for profit, you go and you start a small NGO somewhere where you're actually delivering aid, really delivering aid, and not trying to expand to what you can't do right. Focus on real accountability. You cannot look at these NGO monitors, nonprofit monitors where they give Save the Children 5 stars. I've filled out their documents for how they actually judge how the aid is, like how you are as a charity organization. They don't get it at all. You have to use your own brain and say, can CARE operate 1,051 projects in 84 countries? And can whoever comes to you and says, I have a way to do this properly, can they do what they're saying? And connected to this, funding locally is really probably the best thing you can do right now. Now, if you could do internationally right, that would be great because you can do so much more. The people are more desperate and the money is cheaper. It's much cheaper to fund internationally in Africa than it is to fund here. But if you can't get the accountability, work with your local organizations here where not only can you see it went to what it was supposed to go to, but in addition to that, they know you can see it. That's the most important part. Because that organization, when CARE gets it 5 different ways before it shows up in Hargeisa, they know you're never going to know whether or not it showed up in Hargeisa, and the people in Hargeisa don't have any voice to tell you it didn't get there. So if you fund the local place, you get around that problem. And that's it.